Hello and welcome everybody to another edition of the Pick and Pop podcast. This is our second episode. Not really a planned podcast today, just kind of, for the sake of it type of podcast. But as always, I'm your host, Colby Giacubeno, and I'm joined by my co-host, Brett Roberts. Brett, how's it going, man?
It's going pretty well. Media day is never something I've looked forward to as much as other people. I've never even actually bothered to credential for one. I'm very much about the game of basketball, but pictures and empty quotes, which is all you get on that day. Except this year, there were some interesting thoughts on Cap, of course.
Yeah.
And that was really my only takeaway was listening to Aaron Gordon on Cap, reading Greg Popovich's words on Cap, hearing what LeBron James didn't say. I honestly feel it as a white man, it's not my place to judge someone like LeBron James. He can do what he wants as a black man for his causes. But Carmelo Anthony is really winning me over, and these guys have so much tremendous clout that they're ones that can make changes in society with smaller acts than someone like you or I tweeting out the perfect tweet or something. You know what I mean?
Oh yeah, no doubt, and I'm with you on that. The Cap situation was really the only question that you could ask some players and not really know what you're going to get. The other questions that you ask, you pretty much know what they're going to say, unless it's like a Lance Stevenson or someone like that who just really, I don't want to say doesn't care, but is just 100% real with everybody.
Right.
And I noticed that too. And yeah, you know what you're going to get when you go to media day. Of course, I was fortunate enough to attend the Washington Wizards one. It was my second year, and I really use it for a source of networking, just seeing the other guys in the media. And then, I mean, specifically for this year's team, there wasn't really any interesting storyline heading into it for Washington, but just the fact that there's a lot of new faces from top to bottom. But going back to your Cap thing, there was one specific writer there that all his questions were just simply about Cap, and he's probably working on a big story for it, and it brought up some conversation, and it seems like one of the things that I really respect about the NBA, and Michelle Roberts has already released a press release on it, is they're very free. You guys do what you want as long as it's peaceful. Of course, nobody's getting hurt by it. And, you guys have the freedom to protest anything however you want. And I think that's what makes this league, one of the best, if not the best, in professional sports.
Right. I think that the social awareness is not lacking, but even with a slightly longer leash than the average individual, none of these athletes really want to say the wrong thing either.
Yeah, I mean, I think going back to what you said with Melo, we've watched him grow up, before our eyes, from him going into the league his rookie year, getting caught up in the stop snitching video and all that stuff. Yeah, everybody knows the story, but he's really blossoming into a really good spokesperson, for the league as a whole. I mean, between him, Chris Paul, LeBron, they can really make a difference just with, like you said, one measly tweet or one sentence to the media. People are going to listen to them. That's just how our world operates today. So I think we'll be seeing a lot of different types of protests during this season, and I think ultimately it's going to have a big benefit. Unlike, I feel like the NFL and the football players, while what they've done, what Cap has done has been great. It's brought up conversation. It's sparked debate. It hasn't been anything violent to the point where other players are having a problem with it and reacting violently. Now, when you get on Twitter, that's a whole other story. Shallow-minded people, that's something that you simply can't get away from. But I feel like the NBA players have been very outspoken about it, whereas I think the NBA players will just take action. Less talk, more action. You know what I mean?
Yeah, it depends on what you're considering action. Like Aaron Gordon said, he's not going to protest because when he plays a basketball game, he's there to play a basketball game. And when wants people want his thoughts on the matter, he said he'll certainly give them. I mean, how can you disrespect that? That makes about as much sense as anything I've heard from somebody that does not want to partake in the protest. I think it sets a very bad example for the world that we have these problems that require such actions. How many international players are in the NBA now? About a third, maybe.
Yeah, I mean, it
What are
can
they thinking?
grow.
What are they thinking of the United States of America when they spend all summer in a place where there's no gun violence and they come back here and flip on our goddamn news? Excuse my language.
No, I understand, man. I mean, like, and you know what? I haven't even. So I just a little tidbit before we'll get into the NBA in a second, guys. But we just want to touch on this stuff. I had to work late last night, so I didn't get a chance to watch the debate. But I just kind of I was following along on Twitter, and man, I don't like at this point. I don't even have to watch it, and I'm like, for the first time in my life, really, I've put into thought like maybe one day I'm not going to live in this country. Like I don't know where it's going to go to, but just with our the two candidates, man, I don't know how anybody can feel confident in what this country has in store for it. It's just a really scary situation that we got
You
going
know
on.
what, Colby? But it's not even that I have patriotism, but I will go down with this country when it sinks. I have no problem doing that. I'm very bound to the place I live. I like the people around me. I feel we're a very safe stretch of the country, comparative to a lot of areas, especially Chicago, which is only 5 hours away. I have a lot of friends in the Chicago area. Both my co-hosts on Three Guard Rotation are in Chicago, and now Chicago is just not a place that anyone really feels safe. There's more shootings there than you can possibly even keep track of, almost.
Yep.
And at some point, I just think that we have to realize that guns are a problem the way we treat them. Guns aren't truly the problem by themselves, because that's as ridiculous as the fork and all that argument that people start throwing around. But the way we handle gun culture in America is very, very irresponsible.
I totally agree with you, man. And it's a problem that I don't think is going to be over anytime soon. But the only thing we can do is hope and pray that it is. But definitely, it's something that needs to be talked about. I think it's something that will get touched on throughout the NBA season. I think they'll handle it, the best way I guess they can with their platform. But let's kind of jump into the whole NBA scene as a whole. Of course, that's what this podcast is.
Let's get into some basketball.
Yeah,
I mean, the social issues are something that I feel like everybody needs to take the time to consider.
oh, definitely. No, I
Between
don't.
you don't want to obsess over these things. They'll breed too much negativity, and you deal with them in their due time and when such situations arise. But the people that immerse themselves in the feeds of some of these things that are occurring, they happen in such frequency, you will get obsessed, and I don't advise that for anybody, person, black, white, Hispanic, Asian, or any other ethnicity.
Yeah, completely agree, man. I mean, it is something that needs to be talked about. It's any situation like this, I mean, you have to bring it to the forefront. You can't push it behind. It's only going to make matters worse for us as a country. I mean, at the end of the day, we are one. We are the United States. And you know me. I know you. I live 10 minutes from the city of Baltimore, which isn't a very great place as it is anyway. I mean, Baltimore.
I was a little Colby. All I remember is how great our yard was, the snow and the leaves and the trees. I mean, I lived there till I was 6, bro. I didn't hit the streets yet.
Yeah, well, that part's good. But I mean, it's just so crazy how you're in Baltimore. You make one wrong turn and everything can change. But
well, we got that in this little town. It's a 35,000 person little municipality, but it is sprinkled with what people like to refer to as hoods or almost hoods, right next to neighborhoods that are like middle to upper middle class even sometimes, and it's a fairly typical thing in areas of the country where the average income dips a lot, and it certainly does here. And when that happens, other problems spring up because it's a form of slavery when you can't even afford the food to put on your table, and you're relying on a government check to do it, as many here do. And I mean, the whole slew of systemic racism is so it has its tentacles in so many aspects of our society that it's still going to take a considerable amount of time to correct, even with us all working our absolute hardest.
Yeah, no, I couldn't put it better than that, man. But all right, well let's try to dive into some NBA right now. I just wanted to cover a little bit from what my gatherings yesterday. Once again, I was down at the Verizon Center in Washington D.C. for the Wizards media day. Wizards, coming off a disappointing season. Even though they did finish 500, they missed out on the playoffs for the first time since 2012-13. And, I think a lot of, you can credit that to the injuries that they had to many of the rotation players. I mean, just to name a few right off the bat: Bradley Beal, Gary Neal, Allen Anderson. And then, John Wall was bad on injuries all throughout the season, but still continued to play. So, this summer, of course, everybody knows what the big, what was surrounding it was, land Kevin Durant. Everybody in the basketball world kind of, knew that wasn't going to happen, and it didn't. So, they bring in a slew of role players. Ian Mahinmi, probably the biggest get that they got this summer. He can really affect the game. But of course, I guess the number one headline coming into media day yesterday for this team was the Wall and Beal beef, if you will. That's kind of, the only thing that was surrounding this team besides the question marks of what the new guys will bring, which, if you watch film, you can kind of get a feel for that. But Wall and Beal, they squashed that really quickly. Now, I think Beal did it in a better way. So, he sat down in the interview room and answered a few questions, and then the question came up, and he said, how is your and John's relationship? And all he said was, great. How do you guys think it is? And there was some, laughter in the room. But, he related it perfectly to me. He said that, it's just like a brother relationship. Sometimes you're going to argue and bicker with your bigger brother, little brother, but at the end of the day, you love him. You're going to do whatever you can for him. And you're always trying to compete with each other, which I agree with as well. Now, John kind of is mixing up what he's saying. He said that him and Beal have no problems, no issues at all. But then a few weeks ago, he just said that they dislike each other sometimes on the court. I get what he's saying there from a player perspective, and I'm sure you do too.
See, it's actually the exact opposite of how it should be, though. I have no problem with the guy I don't like off the court, but it's never going to affect how I treat him on the court.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, when it comes to throwing the ball ahead to a guy that's beating you down the court on a break, I'm going to throw the ball ahead, Yep,
and I think that's the big issue that people are waiting to see that unfold. But I don't think it's like – so a stat that shocks some people, and it shocked me too, and I don't have them right in front of me, but last year I think Wall averaged maybe 12 passes a game to Beal. And it converted into like 1.2 assists. Don't mark me, for exact numbers, but I think the only other player besides that was Gortat, and that's of course because they're always in pick and rolls. But so Beal was ranked second, but a lot of people were making that a big deal. I don't think that's a big deal when you look at the comparison of other players. And
I mean, you got to look at how Wall scores too. You can't ignore that.
Exactly, and another thing was, I mean, you guys. When I say you guys, I mean Orlando. The media, the fan base. You guys saw the brunt of it last year in the beginning of the season when Bradley Beal was healthy, and they came down there. I don't know if it was an overtime game, but Beal put up a crooked number, somewhere around 30. He was shooting the ball lights out, and they managed to get a win down in Orlando before he started getting his usual injuries that he got last year. But I think for this team, there is no like motto or anything for this team like you have for some other NBA teams, but it's just a fresh start. Of course, it starts with Brooks up top. He's very, very excited to get his hands on this roster, and I'm excited to see that for him. I mean, he's going to really promote that defensive mindset that they were missing last year because they were trying to transition to a pace and space team. So they're going to get that back, but of course, there is the questions of whether his offensive system is, advanced enough, I guess, rather than just pick and roll, stuff that we saw him run in Oklahoma City with Westbrook and Durant. So as I continue to ramble on, I'll touch other parts of the media day as we go on. But I kind of want to get an outsider's point of view from you of how you see the Wizards this season, how their offseason fared, and I guess what you expect from them.
Now, see, Orlando fans would like some things about the Wizards right off the bat. First of all, Bradley Beal is a Florida Gator, and when he came into the league, Orlando fans already knew how good he was, and he hasn't lived up to those expectations, and it has nothing to do with talent and everything to do with injuries. I think that kind of sums up Bradley Beal's career in two sentences for me at this point. Brooks, he is one of the best in the business, but he has his faults, and certainly we saw plenty of them exposed in Oklahoma City. Uh, and when it comes right down to it, my expectation isn't necessarily that Washington easily makes the playoffs this year. They basically have fielded the same team with minor improvements. Mahinmi will help. He's an excellent defender, as everyone knows. He plays hard. He rebounds. He works. There's absolutely nothing not to like there. And Gortat is one of the best pick-and-roll defenders and scorers in pick-and-rolls, in terms of being good at both of them in the entire league. But it's just it's not a team, I feel, that has a lot of guys that are going to make that necessary leap to give Wall the help he wants and it requires. And the only one that I really think is capable is Beal. That said, even after the good things I've said about Beal and the slightly bad, I don't think that he's going to give them quite enough.
Yeah, I'm with you on the fact that you have questions. Where my questions come in are the backup, the reserve lineup right behind starting five. We have Trey Burke, and then you kind of go. It's kind of weird at the two because you got Jarrell Eddy, who's not a big name at all. He's just a stretch floor guy. Kelly Oubre will probably play the three. Mahinmi, I get, of course at the four, at the five. I'm sorry, and then at the four, it's kind of a toss up as well between a couple players: Andrew Nicholson, Jason Smith, whoever fits well in that role. But I had those questions coming into media day. Not that media day, guarantees anything, but the one thing that John and Brad said, because the team has been playing pickup for the past few weeks with each other at the Verizon Center. And he says the difference between this team is everyone knows their role. He said last year, it was kind of up in the air of what everybody's role was. Everybody kind of knew their role, but it wasn't, set in stone. I guess Randy Whitman didn't really promote what everyone's role was. But, they know that when Jason Smith is setting the screen, he's going to pop to the mid-range. They don't try to extend or overdo what their abilities allow them to. So I think if each player can play their own role this year, I think they can have a really good season. And then, of course, with health playing into that as well. But like I said, those questions come in the second lineup. However, Tomas Sederansky, he said his name was Tomas yesterday. That's how they pronounce it. Who I posted a photo of him, and you actually said I have no idea who that is. Well, he was a draft pick from the Wizards in 2012. He's spent time overseas in Spain playing in the Euro League and stuff like that. Hasn't gotten a whole bunch of time, but everyone was talking about him yesterday in from the pickup games. He's a freak athlete. His athleticism, he will be one of the only guys that come over from Europe, and his athleticism translate into an above average NBA player. Usually that's what we see with European players. They really struggle in that area once coming over.
I mean, there's been more exceptions in recent years than ever before, though.
Yeah, well, yeah, I agree.
The guy on the Rockets, whose name I could never pronounce for the life of me, from Greece, Papa Giacubeno or whatever.
Yeah.
I just call him Papa when I wrote for Space City Scoop. I really did. I shortened it to Papa. But he's a good athlete. Hazonia is certainly a better leaper than I could have ever dreamt of being, even if I had everywhere I went for my entire life. So I think that the perception of the Andre Bargnani type European player will die pretty quickly because teams are no longer looking at those particular candidates to bring over here. And I think that we're not going to see a freak of nature like Porzingis every year. We know that already.
Yeah. Well,
but the idea, the notion that all European players are slow and can't get around picks and don't play tough, and I mean, a lot of those things have already died. Is the idea that all European players aren't athletes.
Yeah, well, he certainly fits that mold. He's 6'7", and he's on tap to play point guard. He has been in the pickup games. Now, I think a good way to kind of transition him, which I'm sure Brooks will do, is play him alongside a Wall for some of his minutes, just to give him, an escape outlet if he is getting pressured a lot. Have a calming presence on the court, but if he can kind of step up and overtake that second spot for the point guard, I would feel more confident than Burke. I just don't know what we're going to get out of Burke this year, but that's still the second line is the only thing that scares me. If this starting five can stay healthy, I really think they can make some noise. I think you could see them, even as high as five or six if everything bodes well for this team. I think they're a very tough team to guard with Wall alone. And if Beal, like you said, can take that next step and become an all-star conversation, I don't see why a 5 seed is out of the equation for this team. So that was just a couple of things that I got from media day. But I wanted to also, we'll jump to the next team that you know best, the Orlando Magic. Just kind of give the folks a rundown of what happened or top headlines kind of going into media day, and then what you gathered.
Well, I think the takeaway a lot of people are all interested in is who's going to start for the Magic. But it was the least surprising option possible, of a Gordon, Ibaka, Vucevic front line in the backcourt that we all expect with Fournier and Elfrid Payton. So there was that takeaway. Serge Ibaka saying he wants to stay in Orlando was nice to hear. I don't know how much credence to put in that when he just got – I mean, who knows how he feels about things when the season gets going. Losing isn't fun. I don't think the Magic are going to be over 500 by any stretch of the imagination, which is disappointing to some extent, but I feel there's been some improvements made. They'll slightly better last year's win total, maybe by a win or two, or maybe at the most 4, become a 39-win team in that event. But really, the upgrades on the roster don't make perfect sense. They don't. You don't really want to overcompensate for something that's been a weakness by adding Ibaka and Biyombo because the rim's been attacked. Just adding Ibaka was enough on draft night. They probably could have went and saved the money on Biyombo and spent it on someone else, or even just held on to it until next summer. I'm not sure exactly what Hennigan's player preferences are regarding next year's crop at all. But it's in Orlando. It's gotten really frustrating for a lot of fans. If they don't make the playoffs this year, it will be the longest drought of playoff loss basketball in franchise history. That's significant. It really is actually. And I don't think the team wants that distinction, but I also don't think there's enough scoring and talent on it to avoid it either.
Yeah, I mean, I can see why. Well, let me just be honest. I can't see why people are high on this team. My stance on it. I've told you all summer. It's kind of been a head scratcher to me why they made these moves. And I honestly don't see this team being any better record-wise than they were last year. I think you're putting too much weight on Fournier and way too much weight on Hazonia. Carrying that load in the perimeter scoring wise, and then that crowded front court, as you just said, it's going to be interesting how that plays out as well. But like I said, I would have felt a lot better if Victor Oladipo was still on the roster, just because you have a go-to guy that you can give it to on the perimeter, and he can score from all 3 levels. But now that they don't have that, I feel like they're really going to struggle. Of course, they'll be a solid defensive team in the paint. Peyton will be solid on the perimeter, but other than that, man, I just really don't know how this team is going to. I think it's just going to be, I think they will be one of the worst teams in basketball. Honestly, I really think they'll be one of the worst teams.
And if that happened, I wouldn't be all that surprised. Getting rid of Oladipo is kind of a travesty in some respects, but it was to address a team need, and at that time it made sense. The Biyombo thing it just doesn't make any sense.
Yeah, well, and real quickly, it's not that they gave away Oladipo and he's a great player. It's just for that team, that was their one like weapon that they could use for that. You know what I mean? Like he fit.
I mean, honestly, the Tobias Harris thing screwed this organization more than anyone's willing to talk about.
Yeah. Well, yeah, exactly. Because he was their real wing threat. I mean, now, like I said, what do they? They just don't have anything now, and I don't understand where they're going with this. Real quick, I wanted to, and you already, we talked to it before we went on air. Yeah, I thought it was kind of interesting that Serge said that he wants to be in Orlando Magic forever. I know it's just media day quotes, stuff and that, but I mean, what do you make of that?
I mean, it could mean a number of several things. But it's like I said to you on Facebook the other day, when you first get somewhere, whether you're moving or on vacation, reality really hasn't sunk in yet for Serge Ibaka. He just got to Orlando. He must really like Frank Vogel is one of my takeaways, which is a good sign. When a player says he wants to stay somewhere, that typically means he likes the coach. So that would be probably the only takeaway of any real significance I would have, even though that has nothing to do with what he actually said.
Yeah. I mean, I see what you're saying there. I think his opinion may change a bit if they do how I predict them and are one of the worst teams of basketball. Just because he's come from such a winning organization, Thunder. I mean, he really doesn't know any different. So it will be interesting to see kind of how he handles that entire situation. Was there really anything else that went on, or did anybody say anything interesting?
Yeah,
I just haven't done my homework on it.
Honestly, of the guys I happen to follow that are Magic media, they were much more interested in taking pictures, which was extremely disappointing to me.
Yeah. Well, I mean, that's another.
I know how these guys look. I don't care. I'm not trying to make a calendar of men that put on my wall.
That's for sure. Well, I mean, then we just go through a few things that happened around the league, and then we'll just wrap it up. Like I said, it was just a kind of a quick pop for us today. But I don't know how to defend. Well, put it this way: when he was in Chicago, I would defend Derrick Rose because I just respected him. I thought where his passion for basketball is genuine. He really loves this game. I know he would try to do anything he could to be the best, and we saw that when he was back at the MVP caliber year, and when he won the MVP award. But I don't know how to defend him anymore, man. Between the whole lawsuit that's going on, that the stuff that has been released about him, the conversations between him and the young lady have been. I mean, it's disturbing. It's kind of uncomfortable for me to read, let alone recite.
Yeah. So look, Colby, he was the first NBA player I ever spoke to in 2010. The first guy I ever asked a question to, said what's up to, anything. And he was humble and he was likable. And it's really hard to process that these same things are done by people that are so likable.
Yeah,
it's caused problems in my personal life beyond just my perception of someone like Derrick Rose. You want to think the best of people when you find out that they're doing some of the things that Derrick Rose apparently thinks are okay.
Yeah, and that was my thing. I mean, he just doesn't seem to have any.
It creates a lot of confidence.
He just doesn't seem to have any remorse for it. I mean, it's almost like he's just even keeled. It's like he's talking. It's like he's in a game, a post game interview when he's talking about this stuff. I mean, this is life altering things, and not only that, but I don't really want to dive too deep into that just because that's a whole nother podcast in itself. But he is still in the media saying idiotic things that I just don't understand when someone's just going to tell him to shut up. I mean, like honestly. So the big thing, of course, everybody knows, or most people should know, when he was traded to New York, he said that he believes that they're a super team, them in Golden State. And we're talking about a New York Knicks team who, at best, may have a 7 seed next season in most predictions, in my predictions, that is. But now, yesterday, he said that he's going to start being more like Kobe Bryant in the way that being efficient. I'll read a quote that he said yesterday. He said, being efficient, every dribble has to have meaning. When you look at Kobe, when you look at a player, I always say Kobe. Every one of his dribbles leads him to a great shot or puts him in a position to take a great shot. You rarely see too many people block his shots or even contest his shots. If they are, he finds a way to get them up or just make a shot. That's what I'm working towards. I don't want to hear that. I don't want to hear that if I'm a Knick player, if I'm Carmelo, that he's going to start emulating Kobe. Now I understand being efficient. That's a positive, but Derrick Rose and Kobe are not in the same sentence, and they should not be used in the same sentence.
What I said to someone earlier, it reflects more on how I feel about aging, and that you never really just let go of what you once were, in your head.
Yeah.
And Derrick Rose is still going to sleep at night thinking he's the player he was in 2010, but he's not. And no one else thinks he is except he himself. To some extent, that's good because it'll keep his career going instead of just hanging it up, like some people really suggested he should. But it's really just a matter of the human mind not wanting to let go of what become its new limitations.
Yeah, and I mean it'll help him right now because he still has, teams hoping that he can still be effective. But I mean, if he goes out this year and has another subpar year, that's it. I mean, pretty much like if you still have that mindset that you're that type of player, nobody's gonna take a chance on you unless your name's the Sacramento Kings. But not to bash Rose completely, I did also see a little clip of him saying that this season he really wants to be more of a facilitator, and that's all he's focused on right now, that's the role that he should have on this team. But I go back to we've never really seen Rose be a facilitator, so I'm not going to buy into that right away until I actually see him do so. But besides that, really nothing out of New York. Just the new faces and everything like that, and nothing too special. Did you see anything else throughout media days that kind of caught your attention at all?
Oh yeah, absolutely. The other big one was Greg Popovich's thoughts on everything.
Oh yeah, there we go. I saw a picture of what he said, but I didn't get a chance to read the whole thing. I don't know if you want to take us through that.
I mean, it's absolutely worth it. Greg Popovich has always been one of the men I've respected more in the entire industry of the NBA and basketball. And he certainly didn't skimp on providing his opinion and explaining why white people do have it easier. And he's well aware of what white privilege is, though he never actually used that term. That's paraphrasing, but he didn't leave anything out. He touched on the issue of guns, which I feel is paramount, equally to what you're talking about with race, because the two almost go hand in hand to some degree, since guns are creating these deaths. What he did also admit is that the solution's complicated enough that he's not going to be able to provide it for anybody that asks him those questions, which requires a degree of humility, because certainly we've seen people on social media doing just the exact opposite of that. I can't exactly quote the entire bit of what Pop said, because it really was probably about somewhere between 700 and 900 words.
Yeah, I saw it was pretty long.
But it absolutely is worth checking out. Quick Google search should give it to you pretty quickly from some site. So, yeah, Pop has always been, an impressive mind. I like to hear more and more of these people come out and speak and explain things to some people, because some people's only exposure to this kind of stuff is what they hear from these people. They're not particularly attuned socially, and if somebody like Phil Jackson would speak up, and just more and more people league wide, I can only see that helping.
Yeah, I mean, to come full circle, because this is kind of how we opened the podcast up.
Well, I mean, that was the only the real notable quote. Everything else was, we're going to try to play with chemistry and be better this season. We've got to avoid injuries. Like, every single cliche I could have thought of came through Twitter that day.
Yeah, and I mean, that's expected. But, what I was going to say was, these people that I wish people would depend on, guys like Pop, maybe a Rick Carlisle, all the really respected members of the NBA. I wish they would fall back on their quotes. But instead, they go to Twitter, they see, just a regular person, either whether it's their friend or, some other guy, a troll account, and they're speaking their mind. And it's unfortunately, man, it's only creating more of a separation between everyone, because it's just causing more problems instead of really taking the problem, putting it at the forefront, and fixing it and doing what we can to make this country what it once was, or just better. I mean, obviously, I really think that social media has just brought the problems to the forefront, and now we all have access to it. I mean, of course, this stuff has been going on. Nobody just had anywhere to put out this news and this outlet. Now, do I agree with the violency, the violent protests and stuff? No, but I really like where it's heading now in terms of sports figures. Because I think it's very easy to say sports figures are role models more than the doctors and the lawyers are these days. You know what I mean? I'm very confident saying that. So if you see someone else taking a stand, a correct, a well thought out stand, a peaceful stand, and really putting their effort into it, and reaching out to other organizations and making donations or whatever, I really think that's good for the youth coming up to how to handle problems.
Yeah, the communication and keeping an open dialogue about these things are probably the absolute most important.
Yeah, I can't.
I'm not afraid to solicit black friends' opinions of what they think I really should say or do, because this is something that's been affecting them specifically, and they're a lot more in touch with it than somebody who can only vicariously imagine.
Yep. I totally agree, man. I mean, it was, and I'm sure we'll revisit this issue again throughout our pods, especially once the season kicks off. But I think I can speak for both of us when I say that's a wrap for today. Definitely, if you guys are listening, be sure to tune in tomorrow. We have our first guest coming on, and it's a really respected guest. I'm really excited. I know Brett's really excited. Are plugged into a couple different teams that we can really dive into here as training camp continues and kicks off today. But until then, for Colby Giacubeno, Brett Roberts, this is the Pick and Pop podcast. Hope you enjoyed. Please send us comments, leave us feedback, questions on what you had, and we will be sure to address it in the next episode. Thank you, Brett. Thank you for your time, and I look forward to speaking with you tomorrow.
All righty.